Hi everyone, welcome to Talk Easy. Today, Catherine and Mike will explore weather-related idioms like under the weather, raining cats and dogs, and every cloud has a silver lining. Discover how these phrases connect to emotions and challenges, and hear the story behind raining cats and dogs. Let's get started.
Okay, so I gotta admit something. I was talking to a British friend of mine, right? And I told him I was feeling a little, under the weather, and they just gave me this look, like I had two heads or something. So I realized even though we use these like common weather idioms all the time, there's a lot more to them than we think.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Idioms are almost like, like little clues to a culture, right? Like
Yeah.
their history and what they believe, even their sense of humor.
That's interesting.
So today we're going to take a look at three of these, I guess you could call them clues. Under the weather, raining cats and dogs, and what was the other one? Oh, right. Every cloud has a silver lining.
I love that one. Very optimistic. Anyway, we've got two sources we're going to be diving into today. And
Okay.
what we want to do is, well, I guess our mission is we don't want to just understand these phrases, right? We want to be able to use them like pros, maybe even, dazzle our friends with how eloquent we are.
Oh, absolutely. And
Yeah.
hey, who knows? Maybe we'll even bust some myths along the way, too.
Sounds good to me. So let's start with the one that got me into trouble. Under the weather. What's the deal with that one?
Well, under the weather basically means you're not feeling great. Like a little sick, maybe a bit tired, but nothing too serious.
It's not, I need to go to the hospital. More like, I need to stay on the couch with some tea.
Uh-huh, yeah, exactly. And the funny thing is, it probably comes from sailors. Back in the day, on those old sailing ships, when sailors got seasick, they'd go below deck to try and feel better, literally getting under the weather.
Yeah, I never thought about that. Makes sense though, right?
It does.
You can just picture those guys getting tossed around up top, then going below deck where it's calmer, and just trying to recover.
Yeah, exactly. And it just shows you that even way back then, people were using the weather to describe how they felt.
Interesting. So we've gone from feeling seasick to needing a day off, all thanks to that one idiom. But let's move on to something a little more intense. What about raining cats and dogs? Does that one actually have anything to do with animals?
Well, if it did, I think we'd have some serious problems.
True. But seriously, where did that saying come from?
Well, there's a theory that it comes from 17th century England. Think about London back then. Lots of people, lots of activity, but pretty bad sewers. So when it rained heavily, all the streets would basically turn into, well, rivers of garbage and stuff.
Yikes.
And yeah, sometimes animals would get swept away and all that.
Oh, okay. So not literally raining cats and dogs,
Okay.
but still pretty wild.
Yeah, makes you appreciate modern plumbing, that's for sure.
Definitely.
But there's another theory that connects it to Norse mythology, where cats were a symbol for storms and dogs represented wind.
Oh, wow.
So raining cats and dogs could have been a way to describe a really bad storm with both wind and rain.
Okay, so that one's a lot more dramatic.
Yeah, kind of like those old stories where the gods controlled the weather.
Exactly. And I guess both theories show us how people have always tried to explain those crazy forces of nature.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so we've covered under the weather and those potential animal-filled downpours. But what about finding a silver lining in every cloud?
Yeah, that's a good one. Makes you think of like the sun breaking through the clouds after a storm, doesn't it? It's about finding the good, even when things are tough.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. But this one doesn't sound as old as the other ones. Or as messy. Ha ha ha.
You're right, it's got a different feel. It actually comes from a poem, believe it or not, by John Milton called Comus from like 1634 or something like that.
Wow,
He
okay.
literally describes a dark cloud with a silver lining, capturing that image of light poking through the darkness.
Wow, that's amazing. So from a 17th century poem to a modern day saying. It's wild how some phrases just stick around, right? Like they really capture something about the human experience.
I think so.
But do you think this idea of finding the good and the bad is something that, is it universal? Do other cultures have similar sayings?
That's a really interesting question. And it kind of gets to the heart of why idioms are so cool, I think.
Yeah.
Like the exact words might be different in different places, but the feelings behind them, those connections between weather and, our emotions, those seem to be pretty universal.
Oh, interesting. So maybe other cultures don't talk about silver linings,
Yeah.
but they have their own way of expressing that same idea.
Exactly. Like, for example, in Japanese, they have a saying, a sunny rain, which means those kind of bittersweet moments when you're feeling both happy and sad at the same time.
Oh, I like that.
And in Persian, they say, after the rain comes the sunshine. It's a way of saying that even though things are tough now, good times are coming.
Those are beautiful.
Yeah.
And even though the words are different, they all seem to be about that same human need, to find hope, to believe that things will get better, even when it feels like it's raining cats and dogs outside.
Exactly.
And that's what makes these idioms so powerful.
It's like they're a shorthand for talking about big emotions.
And they help us connect with each other.
Yeah, they're kind of like bridges between different cultures and even different times.
I love that. Linguistic bridges, haha. But speaking of different cultures, do you think there are any misunderstandings or different interpretations of these idioms?
You know, it's funny you should mention that. I was in France once, and I was trying to describe this huge downpour, and I used raining cats and dogs, but my French friend was so confused.
Oh, really?
Turns out they have their own saying for that, il pleut de cold, which means, like, it's raining ropes.
Raining ropes.
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
And it took me a second, but then I pictured those thick, heavy ropes they use on ships, and it suddenly clicked.
Yeah, I get it.
It gives you the same feeling, right? Like this heavy, intense rain.
Right, but with a French twist.
Exactly. It's a good reminder that even though we all experience weather, every culture sees it a little differently.
Yeah, that's so true.
It's like one of the challenges, but also one of the beautiful things about learning other languages.
Totally. It's like you're uncovering all these little hidden gems of language.
Yeah, and you start to understand how other people think and feel. But let's get back to these 3 idioms we've been talking about. How can our listeners actually start using these in their own conversations?
Well, the key is to think about the situation and what you're trying to say. Like, under the weather is great for casual situations, when you're not feeling 100% but don't want to get into a whole thing about it.
Yeah, like if your coworker asks how you are and you don't want to give them your entire medical history.
Exactly. You just say, I'm feeling a bit under the weather today, and it gets the point across without being too dramatic.
Right. Okay, so under the weather for those low-key moments. What about raining cats and dogs?
That one's great when you want to add a little drama, you know, or even some humor. Imagine you're telling a story about this crazy storm you got caught in. Instead of just saying it rained hard, you say it was raining cats and dogs out there. We got totally soaked just running into the car.
Uh-huh, yeah. It definitely paints a picture.
That's in it.
And what about every cloud has a silver lining?
That one's perfect for when you want to encourage someone or try to see the good in a bad situation. Like, imagine a friend is going through a tough time, lost their job or something. It can be hard to know what to say.
It really can.
But you could say, I know things are tough right now, but remember, every cloud has a silver lining. Something good will come out of this.
Oh, that's nice.
It's a way to give them hope and let them know you're there for them.
Yeah, I like that. So all 3 of these can be used in so many ways. It's like having a bunch of different tools for communicating.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up, I want to go back to something we talked about earlier. That idea of weather being connected to our emotions. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Like, think about when we say under the weather. It's often more than just physical, right? It can be like a feeling of being overwhelmed, like emotionally drained.
Yeah, like you're being weighed down by something.
Exactly.
And when we say it's raining cats and dogs, it can feel like everything's out of control.
It's like these idioms are a way to express those feelings that are hard to describe with regular words.
Right.
And then every cloud has a silver lining. That one's about hope and resilience, like saying, yeah, things are rough now, but we'll make it through.
Yeah, it's like a way of saying that we're tougher than we think.
Exactly.
So in a way, these weather idioms aren't just about the weather itself. They're about how we understand our own feelings and experiences.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it.
And it shows how powerful language can be.
For sure.
Language can help us see the world in new ways.
And it helps us connect with other people on a deeper level.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, we've covered a lot today, haven't we?
We have.
We've talked about where these idioms come from, how different cultures use them, and even how they connect to our emotions. But before we go, I want to give our listeners a challenge.
Ooh, I love a challenge.
All right, so here it is. This week, I want you to try to use one of these weather idioms in a conversation. Like, maybe you're feeling tired and need a break. Instead of just saying, I'm tired, try, I'm feeling a bit under the weather. Or maybe you see a crazy downpour. Don't just say, wow, it's raining hard. Go all out and say, it's raining cats and dogs out there.
Haha, love it. And if you're feeling really adventurous, Try using raining ropes and see if anyone gets the French connection.
Yeah, that's a great idea. But remember, this isn't about being perfect, okay? It's about playing with language, having fun with it, and seeing how these idioms can make your conversations more interesting.
Exactly. And hey, who knows, maybe you'll even inspire someone else to start exploring idioms too.
That's the goal. So there you have it. We've gone from feeling under the weather to finding that silver lining, and even braving a storm of raining cats and dogs. But the real fun starts now. It's time to take these idioms out into the world and make them your own. We'll see you next time.
And remember, even when it's raining cats and dogs, there's always a silver lining to be found. Happy talking. So every cloud has a silver lining. It always makes me think of those moments when the sun comes out after a storm. It's like finding the good even when things are tough.
Yeah, it's that feeling that no matter how bad things get, there's always hope. But this one doesn't sound as old as the others.
You're right, it has a different vibe. It's actually from a poem.
Really?
Yeah, by John Milton. It's called Comus, from way back in 1634.
Wow, okay.
And in the poem, he literally describes a dark cloud with a silver lining. Like he actually paints that picture of light breaking through the darkness.
That's amazing. So we've gone from this 17th century poem to this common saying we use all the time.
It's pretty cool how some phrases just like capture the human experience so perfectly.
Totally. But do you think this idea of finding the positive in a negative situation, is that something that's like universal? Do other cultures have similar sayings?
That's a great question. And it kind of goes to the heart of why idioms are so fascinating. Because, the exact words might be different in different cultures. But the underlying emotions, those connections between weather and how we feel, those seem to be pretty universal.
Right. So maybe they don't talk about silver linings specifically, but they have other ways of expressing that same sentiment.
Exactly. Like, for example, in Japanese, they have a saying, a sunny rain. It refers to those kind of bittersweet moments when you're feeling happy and sad at the same time.
Oh, I like that.
And in Persian, there's a saying, after the rain comes the sunshine, which is a reminder that even after tough times, good times will come again.
Those are beautiful. And even though the words are different, they all seem to tap into that same human desire to find hope, to believe that things will get better.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Even when it feels like it's raining cats and dogs outside.
Exactly.
And that's what makes these idioms so powerful, right?
They give us a way to express these complex emotions in a really concise way.
And they help us connect with each other.
Yeah, it's like they're these little bridges between
Wow.
different cultures and different time.
I love that. Linguistic bridges.
Mhm.
But speaking of different cultures, are there any interesting cultural differences or maybe misunderstandings around these idioms?
It's funny you should say that. I was traveling in France once, and I was trying to describe this huge downpour,
Yeah.
and I used raining cats and dogs, but my French friend had no idea what I was talking about.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they have their own expression for that. Il pleut des cordes, which means it's raining ropes.
Raining robes.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so cool.
It took me a minute to get it, but then I picture those thick, heavy ropes they use on ships, and it suddenly made sense.
Yeah, I can see it.
It gives you that same feeling of like intense, heavy rain.
Right, but with a uniquely French twist.
Exactly. It's a good reminder that even though we all experience the weather, every culture has its own way of seeing it and describing it.
It's like one of the fun things about learning other languages. You get to uncover all these little differences and nuances.
That's
It's
smart.
like you're peeling back the layers of a culture.
And discovering these little linguistic gems along the way.
But let's bring it back to these 3 idioms we've been talking about. What are some ways our listeners can actually start using these in their own conversations?
Well, I think the key is to think about the situation and what you're trying to say. Like, with under the weather, it's perfect for casual situations. When you're not feeling great but don't want to go into a whole lot of detail.
Like if your coworker asks how you're doing.
Yeah.
And you don't want to launch into a full-blown medical explanation.
Exactly. You can just say, I'm feeling a bit under the weather today. And it gets the point across without being overly dramatic.
Makes sense. Okay, so under the weather, for those more low-key situations, what about raining cats and dogs?
That one's great for adding a little drama or humor to your descriptions. Like, imagine you're telling a story about this crazy weather experience you had. Instead of just saying, it rained really hard, you could say, it was raining cats and dogs out there. We got soaked just running to the car.
Haha, yeah. It definitely paints a more vivid picture.
It does, doesn't it?
And what about every cloud has a silver lining?
That one's perfect for offering encouragement or finding the positive in a tough situation. Like, imagine a friend is going through a hard time. Maybe they lost their job or something.
Yeah, it can be hard to know what to say in those moments.
It can. But you could say something like, I know things are tough right now, but remember, every cloud has a silver lining. Something good will come out of this.
Oh, that's nice.
It's a way to offer hope and let them know you're there for them.
Yeah, I like that. So all three of these idioms can be used in so many different ways.
It's like having a whole toolkit of different ways to communicate.
But before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something we talked about earlier, that idea of weather being so closely tied to our emotions. Why do you think that is?
It's like weather is this language we all understand, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Even if we don't speak the same, like, actual language.
Right, it's like a universal language of emotions.
Exactly. And when we say, like, under the weather, it's often more than just, physically feeling sick.
Yeah.
It can be this feeling of being totally drained.
Yeah.
Like emotionally exhausted.
Like you've been through a storm almost.
Exactly. And the raining cats and dogs, that can feel like everything's out of control, chaotic.
Yeah, like you're being bombarded with stuff.
Right. Exactly. And these idioms, they kind of give us a way to talk about those feelings that are hard to explain with regular words.
It's like they give us a shortcut to understanding each other.
Yeah, I think so.
And then there's every cloud has a silver lining. That one's about resilience, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like saying, hey, things are tough, but we're going to get through this.
It's about finding that strength within ourselves.
Exactly.
So in a way, these weather idioms aren't just about the weather itself. They're about how we understand our own inner world.
I think that's a really beautiful way to put it.
And it shows how powerful language can be.
It really does.
Language can help us see things in new ways and connect with each other on a deeper level.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From the history of these idioms to how they're used in different cultures, and even how they connect to our own emotions. But before we wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with a little challenge.
Oh, I like a challenge.
So here it is. This week, I challenge you to try and use one of these weather idioms in a real conversation. Like, let's say you're feeling tired, you need a break. Instead of saying, I'm tired, try saying, I'm feeling a bit under the weather.
I love it.
Or maybe you see this crazy downpour outside. Don't just say it's raining hard. Go all out and say it's raining cats and dogs out there.
That's great. And hey, if you're feeling really brave, try raining ropes. See if anyone picks up on the friend connection.
Yeah, that's a good one. But the important thing is to have fun with it. Don't worry about being perfect. Just see how these idioms can make your conversations more interesting. And who knows, maybe you'll even inspire someone else to explore the world of idioms too.
Now, that's what it's all about.
So there you have it, folks. We've gone from feeling under the weather to finding that silver lining, and even braved a storm of raining cats and dogs. But now it's your turn. Take these idioms out into the world and make them your own. We'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.
Happy talking, everyone.